A very warm welcome to all of you, especially those of you who haven't been in this sanctuary in some time and who come back today. I'm looking at our friends on Zoom and I see you can see them. Friends on Zoom, I'm going to take a risk and ask you to do something if you're decently dressed this morning. We're all looking at your screens and we see your names, but we don't see your faces, and we would love to here in the sanctuary, just as you can see the backs of our heads. We're working on another camera. But if you can come off of Zoom and wave at us, we would love to see you this morning. You are a part of us and have been with us these many, many months, and we're delighted you're here. Can you see all these waving hands? Whoever you are, however you join us, wherever you are on life's journey, Weston Church is a home for you. This morning, we heard the story of Jesus eating with some sinners, and I love this story. I love this especially on days like this when many of us are coming back from summer vacations. Eating with sinners is one of my favorite things to do, as a matter of fact. Many of you know that cooking is my foremost creative outlet, and there are few joys for me that rival the gathering of friends and family around a table groaning from the weight of good food and drink. Over the summer, Patrick and I hosted what seemed to be an unending parade of family and friends, young and old, new and longer term. What did I do on my summer vacation, you may ask? I made beds and washed linens. I also picked vegetables and enjoyed the weekly Iron Chef challenge of my CSA. And I worried whether the apple trees I'm blessed to tend would yield their fruit this year. They have. I'm going to be bringing you some, but not as many as I had hoped, for the squirrels, I am learning, are quicker on the harvest than I am. Every week was menu planning and shopping and mixing up guest lists, those staying with us and those locals who would fill out the table. Often following the guidance of Julia Child, I would make a cake. You all know her exhortation about parties and cakes, don't you? A party, she famously quipped, a party without a cake is just a meeting. And so often, early on Friday mornings, while having coffee and before Patrick was out of bed, I would bake the layers so that they could cool before icing them sometime after lunch. There are favorite recipes I made week after week. That's the thing where rotating the local guests is most important. The visiting ones don't know or care what you served last Saturday ones. The local ones do, and they judge if you serve the same thing again and again. And there are new things I try each year. I've come to view individual dietary patterns. It seems all of us have new ones every year. And I've come to view them as personal challenges. I love a guest who's bold enough to answer my text of any dietary things I should know with the sort of brutal and sometimes contradictory honesty of, well, I'm a vegetarian, but I eat prosciutto and bacon. Or celery is the devil, or referring to a child that was coming, all he eats is hot dog these days, so anything will do. These are all true quotes from guests this summer. I love welcoming people. Idiosyncratic and beautiful and tired and starving for rest, and giving them the gift of space and time and of food. It's how I view my work as a pastor, too. When I was a young person, one of the things I wanted to be when I grew up was a pastor and an innkeeper. And in a way, I still am. I invite people we love to join us for a relaxing long weekend. And as one of these beloveds said to me this July when visiting with her husband, "You don't seem capable of relaxing at all. You should try sitting still." "Yes," I replied, "but not yet." The pattern in our house is that I do all the work up to and including getting dinner on the table, while Patrick entertains and welcomes and makes drinks and hangs out, Mary to my Martha. Once the meal is on the table, though, I sit with it. Ask Patrick what he did on his summer vacation, and he'll likely respond, dishes. It's always amazing to me, and there's probably a less polite word that he would use about the number of dishes one can amass with even a simple dinner. I'm a pretty neat cook. I tend to clean as I go, but somehow, right at the moment of getting everything to the table, I realize I hadn't made the sauce for the fish. Out comes the blender and 6 ingredients previously put away, or reduced the drippings to the glaze I wanted: saucepan, butter, wooden spoon, bottle of wine, more herbs, shedding all over the kitchen counter. Or that I had intended to serve the pasta I made earlier as a starter, and so out comes a whole nother set of plates and forks. I hadn't made the hot dog for the kid that only eats hot dogs. Better get to that. Oh well. I learned to cook from my grandmother and from Julia Child and from PBS. I cook with precision and thought. I also cook with relative abandon, and friends have noted a relative carefreelessness. One friend, upon being asked what's for dinner by another friend while driving to his house in the Catskills, responded, "We'll figure it out. You know he can make dinner out of a box of saltines and 2 rubber bands." Luckily, I've never had to try. Once all the food is on the table, once water pitchers are filled, wine is open, and people are seated, that's when I tend to start to relax. My Martha melts into Mary. Sometimes I even take a moment to change my shirt. I myself transform as the gifts of the earth, the gifts of God for all of us, sit before us. The real joy in all of this is always the table itself, the gathering of people, of beloveds, the conversation, the laughing too hard, of eating or drinking too much. And then the joy and the groans when everyone's too full, and I remind them, but wait, there's cake. Cake is often eaten for breakfast in my house. I sit with people. We indulge. We talk. We dream dreams and we work through troubling pasts. It feels holy without us having to call it as such. God is always present and sometimes even discussed. Like Jesus, I love welcoming sinners to my table. All of my guests, their host included, are. I've never had a meal that didn't include sinners. Imagine for an instant how boring that would be. But the sinners of the religious authority of Jesus' day, the religious authorities, pious and fundamental, judgmental, always scoffing in the background and gossiping about how this isn't what God would want, or, well, that's not very religious, are not so very different than the religious authority these days, carrying their piety and work or effort that may feel overly sacrificial or that forgets the gift of the day that they are, or in social media posts that feel more like sermons, always the stick and never the carrot. The sins the religious authorities of Jesus' day were railing against were no doubt some of the same ones of which my dinner guests are guilty. My guests, perhaps like Jesus's, all get haircuts, happily ignoring Leviticus 19:27. Some have tattoos, Leviticus 19:28. Many are divorced, Matthew 5:32, and I should say, are much better people for it. Cantaloupe draped over prosciutto, or even my favorite 7-year-old's hot dog, completely disregard Leviticus 11:7. And though I am allergic, who doesn't love an oyster on a hot summer day, Leviticus 11:8? And more seriously, I probably don't even have to mention, nor will I quote any of the verses against, that my table always has at least one, generally 2, and sometimes even an exclusive 8 or 10 men who lie with men, or women who love women, and people who refuse to be bound by gender or sexual norms and binaries, wearing whatever treasure they found in the drag closet before dinner. And I myself stand here right now, standing in this pulpit, God's pulpit, your pulpit. I myself am wearing a cotton poly blend shirt, ignoring Leviticus 19:19, which is made, irony upon irony, exclusively for clergy, sinners. All of us. I welcome them all. I don't hate myself for being one. I spend my summer remembering Jesus and how he welcomed sinners to his table, and how I, like Jesus, can welcome them to mine. to our home, and often, because it is only one house, to shared bedrooms where I try hard not to imagine what sort of sinning might be going on in there. Sinners are welcome, says Jesus. Maybe I should go to one of those websites that will print anything on pretty much anything else and get some napkins that quote him. Of course, it's easy to rattle off and even lightheartedly joke about some of the quote-unquote sins of Jesus' time that we no longer view as sin. Haircuts and dietary preferences. We cling to some of these ancient sins of other people when they're useful. Divorce is okay if it's amicable or if we're on the side of the offended party. Maybe it's not if it's not. And others, maybe the subversion of women works for some folks. Maybe the oppression of LGBTQ people is still a sin for some folks. Maybe slaves no longer need to be subservient to their masters, but as we've learned here on the Upper West Side by the condition of any of our signs for peace and justice, we're far from black lives not having to be trampled upon by blue ones. There are indeed ancient sins, listed ones, prescribed ones, recorded ones, legal ones, that Jesus looked beyond to see the person and not the sinner, the redeemed, not the lost, the one, not the 99. And there are common ones, more modern ones, that we and those who are at our tables may wrestle more with today. Idolatry, loving anything more than God, failing to live as who we are, forgetting to remember whose we are. Greed, that's a big one here in New York, and the cause of certainly more than one calamity of even the great collegiate church. There are any number of things that separate us from the love of God in each of our days, any number. Sin, not just a list of prescriptions and restrictions, but sin, anything that separates us from the love of God and the feeling that God loves us. It's everywhere. We're told it's everywhere. And sometimes we even see it where we shouldn't. Sometimes we can't let go of the idea of sin that some other person has told us. Sometimes we sacrifice ourselves thinking we're being virtuous. We don't come out. We stay in abusive marriages. Or for women who are now forced to carry fetuses that weren't wanted or that were forced upon her, or whose very presence causes imminent and lethal danger to the woman herself. When humans start listing what is sin and what isn't sin, and then when humans start codifying a personal belief about what is sin into legal law for everyone, well, then we often get it wrong. As a species, as a creation of God, we just don't have a great track record of interpreting God's love, of interpreting God's intentions without injecting human motive. If sin is only that which separates us from the love of God, then reconciliation with God and each other with the love of God and the love of each other is the antidote. Jesus knew a good place for this sort of reconciliation is the dinner table. I've seen it work time and time again, too, at home, at other people's homes where I've been a guest, at restaurants, and especially here, around this table, whenever we celebrate the sacrament of communion. Sinners, welcome. Grace abounds. Lives are transformed. And as we heard from Kim this morning, there is more joy in heaven over one sinner who is redeemed than over 99 righteous people who need no redemption. The trick with this parable is that I don't think I know 99 righteous people. And from the Gospel's accounts and of how often the disciples got it wrong, I'm not sure Jesus knew 99 righteous people either. What we know is that God alone is good. And the rest of us, well, the rest of us, we should go to more dinner parties. We should try to find our redemption around tables. After church today, we have the opportunity to gather around a meal ourselves. Out on the sidewalk, under the scaffolding, Michael and Debbie and Tito have put together a festive fare for each of us to welcome and to be welcomed, for each of us to be redeemed and to help redeem each other, and for heaven to applaud. The reason for this bit of hospitality today is our celebration of a woman who has given us much and who is going on to do even more. For today marks the conclusion of Pastor Bridget's service to West End as our minister of engagement. We will mark this moment officially in just a few minutes, and we'll all celebrate her time with us at lunch outside. Over her time with us, Bridget has pointed again and again to the redemption that is possible when we speak truthfully about the sins that are all around us, the ones that are systemic or inherited or ingrained or overwhelming. Bridget has helped many of us heal and challenged all of us to a deeper examination of ourselves, our places of privilege, our places in the world and of justice, and of the limitations and privileges each of us possess simply by the color of our skin, the identity of our gender, or who we love. The self-examination of conscience has long been one of the principles, if not a very popular one, a principal invitation by the church and its leaders to the people we serve. Come before God with examined consciousnesses, and you shall be made whole. That is the promise that clergy are called to share. Come before God with a humble heart, eager to name what you do not know rather than boasting of what you do, and you shall know love. Come together over a meal, and you may find your liberation, that it's been bound up with the very person sitting next to you, while they share their story and tell of their freedom. Bridget, minister of word and sacrament, servant of West End, child of God, has lived this call with us, and I, for one, am most grateful. Yesterday, I crossed off one of the 3 remaining tasks on my rather lengthy summer vacation to-do list. This was a yellow piece of legal paper on my kitchen counter that made no end of guests laugh at me, but I stacked a quart of firewood. Patrick was furious at me that I was too cheap to have it stacked and rather protested that stacking firewood is something I'm immensely qualified to do, and besides, I rather like it. With each wheelbarrow of wood moved from the pile unceremoniously dumped in my driveway to the orderly racks closer to the house, I thought of how summer was turning to fall. With each log stacked on top of the others, I imagined the time I'd soon be moving it from its place now to where it would be inside, used for heat and for beauty, where other people might soon gather. With each row complete, I took stock of work that, so unlike the majority of my work, had clear markers of progress, and that would, before afternoon was over, be done. I also thought of each of you and the stories of grace, the story of dinners I would tell you today, the ones I know you will tell me too. I thought of Bridget and the words of gratitude, of affection that I would tell her today. I think of all the wood we have carried together, of getting from one place to the next. I carried wood yesterday thinking of dinners and of guests, who we would invite next, and of how soon summer barbecues would yield to pot pies and roasted squash. Bridget's ministry grows deeper through parish work and soon into the academy. West End Church, too, is entering a new season, a time of renewal and of hope, and a new way of being together. From summer to fall, from church to academy, from call to call, the journeys all of us are on. And through it all, In all that we do, sinners and beloveds, indistinguishable from each other, are welcome. Grace will transform us all. And together, here and there, where we've been and where we have yet to go, we are the Church of Jesus Christ in this world. In this world. A world we must help to heal. A world that needs our witness. A world that is longing for grace, and grace abundant.